update from the field regarding the hunting season so far from Justin Foster. And then at the end, we've got Kristen Cannon and Jason Clay taking some questions, and the rest of us can weigh in as well. So I want to just tell you how important it is for us to be able to interface with you all sportspersons out there that are supporting our agency and are the beneficiaries of this wonderful wildlife resource and parks resource that we manage for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. It's a part of our mission, and it's so important for us to be able to have a method of communicating and open communication. And so part of that process is that we have a statewide roundtable, Sportspersons roundtable group, that we have many people from geographically distributed around the state, and we meet as a group twice a year, usually in Buena Vista, and we meet with the leadership team. And so there are sportsperson roundtable members that are selected by the director of the Division of Parks and Wildlife. And then there are 4 regions in the state, if those of you that are joining are new to this. There are 4 regions in the state: Northeast, Northwest, Southwest, Southeast, and we each have caucus members that are actually attendees at the statewide roundtable. And so we tonight will need to select 2 caucus members. And basically the caucus is, we try to have 2 caucus meetings a year in each region. We've been a little remiss this year. We tried to have one in March, and then COVID hit, and we were trying to struggle through the virtual process. So this is a good one that I'm glad we're having this virtual meeting tonight. But it's really important. I'm excited that you're all here to join us tonight. And if you have questions, you can ask them as we go through. But I'm going to turn this election and selection of Northeast delegates process over to Deputy Regional Manager Kristen Cannon.
Great, and I don't think I'm on mute. Nope, we look good to go. So as Mark kind of described the process, we have 15 people who signed up to run as the delegates, and we've got 2 positions. So we'll be voting for 2 people tonight. And we just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to spend 1 or 2 minutes visiting with participants about why they'd like the position. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite them in. So if you have been getting emails from me and you're ready to go and talk about how you want to be a delegate, you'll get a notice pretty soon inviting you to become a panelist. So just hit accept. And then once I call on you, you are welcome to give your 1 to 2 minutes. I will say, because we had so much interest, we wanted to make sure it's kind of confusing to keep everyone straight. So we've also prepared a document with that the delegate, the folks interested in being delegates, prepared a few sentences, a couple paragraphs about themselves that you can go and reference later. So as soon as they're done, sort of given their 2 cents, we will put the poll out there to vote. And I'm going to do it in a couple different ways. I'm going to post a link to that document with some additional information, or just to help you keep everybody straight, that you can click on. And I'm also going to post the link to the poll to vote. So you can vote at any time during the meeting. If you want to wait until after the meeting is over, or you're having trouble using the links, I will also email you this information after the meeting is complete. And you are welcome to vote on your 2 delegates until about 10 p.m. tonight. So are there any questions on how this is going to work? And if you have a question, you can raise your hand or type it in the Q&A box. We also, how this works is, as we go through the meeting today, you can type any questions into that Q&A chat box, and we will try to get them answered as the topic comes up, or at the end. If we get to the end of this and we didn't get everyone's questions answered, we will try to follow up with you after the meeting. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Okay, so I am going to bring, because he is, let's see. So Brian Soliday, we're gonna end up going a little bit in alphabetical order here. Let me, panelist. So just accept that, and as soon as you come on, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep, I'm unmuted now.
Perfect. Well, Brian, take it away whenever you're ready.
Cool. So good evening. My name is Brian Soliday, and I'm participating tonight from beautiful St. Vrain Valley up here in Frederick, Colorado. Boy, that's an upside down. That's interesting. I'm going to stop my video. That's a little interesting. My wife and I and our 3 daughters are 27-year residents of Colorado. I enjoy archery hunting, yard work, and volunteering in my spare time to take Purple Heart recipients and first-time youth hunters afield. I went to school on a football scholarship at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and there I received both graduate and undergraduate degrees in geography, specializing in remote sensing and digital mapping, so kind of near and dear to our hearts here in the hunting community. Professionally, I have about 30 years of experience working in sales, marketing, and channel development within the what's called GIS, Geographic Information Systems industry, and a pretty extensive background in public speaking. I presented at over 100 conferences on every continent except Antarctica, and I've written published articles in numerous publications, as well as 3 articles in Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, including a 33-day solo odyssey for my Colorado archery bighorn sheep and a pretty decent 8x6 bull I took on the Uncompahgre. In terms of volunteer experience, I've been a volunteer for the last 20 years, helping to drive a positive change through a number of organizations. I currently serve on the board of directors of American Heroes in Action, where I focus on getting Purple Heart recipients out in the field on hunts, trying to get them whole again. I also serve on a board of a group called Wounded Eagle UAS, where we help disabled vets obtain credentials to operate commercial drones and get them placed in jobs. And tied to here in Colorado, I'm also a 20-year volunteer for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I served 7 years as the Colorado State Volunteer Chair, helping to raise millions of dollars for on-the-ground conservation work in elk country. And then through the RMEF and American Heroes in Action, I've had the pleasure to be a volunteer guide and helped over 50 youth take their first big game animals here in Colorado. So what's really important to me as it relates to CPW's mission, there's a lot, but the 3 key items for me are predator management, youth hunting engagement, and public land access. That's all I've got.
Say that's great. Thank you very much, Brian. And next up we have Jordan Humphreys. So Jordan, you're still muted. Do you need us?
Yep.
Nope, you got it. Go for it.
Figured it
Thank
out.
you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm interested in this position because I've been a lifelong sportsman. I started out as born in the state of Missouri, which was one of the first states to have a non-political conservation agency put in place. We also have an 8-cent sales tax dedicated to conservation, which I think is an interesting and unique funding option. You know, I've been an attorney since 1995, so I bring that experience. And I know there's a lot of competition for this spot, so look forward to seeing how this turns out. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jordan. Prasad.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ohm. I want to say hello to my fellow anglers and hunters. My name is Ohm. I'd like to just introduce myself. I was brought to Colorado in the 90s through the Air Force down in the Springs with our brothers and sisters. And then back in 2008, I finally got the chance to move here from a job opportunity. Spent a lot of my free time in the garage. Let me turn my camera on. You can see I'm actually sitting in the garage still. When I'm not in the garage, I'm out in the water. I'm thrilled CPW is offering this roundtable. I think it's a great opportunity for us to voice our opinions. But if you want to see, what I do, find me on any body of water. I'm usually trolling for pike, trout, walleye. I'm throwing flies. I'm punching holes in the ice. I fish year round pretty much. Some people call me crazy, but it's in my blood. What I do love most is talking to other folks out on the water, at the boat ramps. I know the inspectors, most of them. we've all kind of seen how much the state has grown, and I'd like to help CPW, better manage their hunting and angling in the state, so we can, continue enjoying what they've done for us in the future. Hopefully, I didn't expect that many people, vying for the spot, but yeah, let's see what happens.
Great, thanks. Am I pronouncing that right?
Ohm?
Oh, God, I did it twice in a row.
No, yep.
Excuse me.
It's
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, we're really heartened by the interest in this too. So, no matter what happens, we hope everybody can stay involved with the roundtable, and there'll always be other opportunities. So please stay involved regardless of the role. So thank you very much. And next we'll have Cassie Smith.
Hi there, my name's Cassie Smith. For my day job, I guess I'm an engineer out of Boulder, Colorado. Outside of that, I am pretty active in the conservation community. I'm the Denver Regional Director for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and Denver Ambassador for Artemis, which is a subsidiary of the National Wildlife Federation. And I take a lot of joy in being a part of this community, and I'm happy to see that I recognize several of your names and faces. Partially, my husband works for CPW as a DWM now in training, so I'm pretty tied into this community, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conservation work and this opportunity as a regional delegate.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. Next, we have Scott Calvin.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Thank you for letting me be here. I really do appreciate it. My main interest is I'm native of Colorado, been here 58 years. I got kids, grandkids. They all enjoy hunting, fishing, the outdoors. And my whole thing is just to preserve it. I would like things to be close to the way it was when I was growing up. I know with the amount of people that are here and everything else now, things have changed, but I would still like to help make that happen for generations to come. That's basically where I'm at. I'm a member of Muley Foundation and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Prior treasurer of Muskies Inc. Until they went away in the Northern Chapter. And I just enjoy being outdoors.
Great.
That's all I got.
That's enough. Thank you. That's perfect. Appreciate that. Lane Walter, have you go next, if you don't mind.
Hey everyone. So I'm a Denver firefighter. I grew up hunting and fishing. I have two young boys that love to be out in the field. My wife is a big time hunter as well. It's deeply ingrained within my family to be in the outdoors, and I try to get my family involved as much as possible. I'm a volunteer with American Hero Adventures, where we take wounded warriors, veterans, firefighters, police officers, first responders out on different hunts. I just got done doing a 2-week hunt up in Alaska, taking them out as a team lead for that. On top of that, I've been involved in the outdoor industry for the past 10 years as a cameraman and field producer, but I kind of wanted to start focusing my time in a more positive effort so that I can help preserve my way of life and this way of life for my kids, and have something that I can pass on and just be a little bit more positive impact. That's all I got.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lane. Next, we have Ken Messinger.
Hello, everyone. I'm a Colorado native. Spent 13 years in the military. I'm retired from the State Department of Corrections. I like hunting, fishing, camping. Done elk hunting up on the Roan Cliff, the flat tops, and south rim of the Glenwood Canyon. Fished practically all over the state, primarily fly fishing now. Been a Boy Scout, as I said, in the military for 13 years. I just think I'd be a good asset for a representative for sportsmen throughout Colorado.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Next up, we have Jim Rood. And I know, Jim, I should know how to say your last name, so hopefully I didn't mess that up too much. Okay, it's possible that Jim is also on the phone. So I will work on finding Jim, and we'll have Eric Huff go instead. Do we? Oh, I thought I had seen him. I might, hang on, let me double check. All right, I'll circle back and check where he may be. And Wes Rogers, how about you can go next?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Weston Rogers. Kristen has a little bit more info about my background that she'll send out with everyone. I'm interested in helping foster calm, intelligent conversations between sportsmen and women in CPW, and facilitate, any misunderstandings, or just kind of bring those two groups together. And then issues that are particularly important to me are the overall conservation of wildlife, as we all probably have that issue. And then ensuring opportunity and access to this resource for all types of people.
Thank you. Apologize. Okay, and George Cromwell.
On.
George, I can see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep, gotcha. Sorry about that.
No problem. Hi, I'm George Cromwell. I'm owner of a small design firm in Fort Morgan, out here on the Eastern Plains, and I was a building contractor for over 40 years. I've always preferred to be outside and learn fishing from my grandfather on the Poudre River. He was a fantastic fly fisherman, one of the best. He used bamboo, it was just awesome. I first learned to hunt at my father's side, shooting rabbits with an old single shot 22. Over the last several years, I've hunted deer, antelope, and elk, along with destructive varmints. In recent years, I have challenged myself to hunt primarily with a bow. I don't always get something. I think this has taught me to plan well so that my hunt will go well. And that is also true of life. Proper planning will give you better results than going off ill-prepared or half-cocked. Another thing archery has taught me is patience. Sitting in a tree stand for 8 hours will certainly do that. The hunting legacy is something I'd like to pass on to my family. My wife and I have camped near Red Feather Lakes with our camper and ATVs for the last 9 years. We tent camped before that. One thing that concerns me are the fires burning around the state and what might be left of the camping, hunting, or fishing areas. These are all some of my concerns. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, George. Jim, I'm gonna try, oh, I can only ask you to unmute. Jim, I don't see any of the phone numbers as being one that you listed. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, yay. All right, Jim.
That's the first time that I've seen an unmute button.
Oh, well, yeah, that's because you've been upgraded to special. So go for it, Jim, when you're ready.
Okay. So I came to Colorado in the 60s mainly for the hunting and fishing. I hunt all methods of take. My passions are the bow and the fly rod. I've helped CPW in a number of ways. I've been a member of the information team at the Sportsman Show in January for several years, a participant in the Bear Aware program. I've served on several survey teams, including lynx, river otter, and waterfowl. I've been a hunt master for almost 15 years. I lead a couple of waterfowl hunts a year, and then I participate in other hunt masters projects. I've also written several articles for the Elk University site on CPW website. As far as affiliations, I'm a member of the Loveland Open Lands Advisory Commission. That's an advisory commission that advises Loveland City Council on acquisition and management of open lands. Advice would include everything from possible negotiations to rules of use of property. And I've been involved in several acquisitions that involve supporting properties, one of which was the Boulder acquisition. Loveland Open Space now owns both the west side and the north side of Boulder. And we've sort of been in coalition with Parks and Wildlife to retain the surface rights of that lake. I think being a member of both groups would enhance ability to work with both groups and would serve to better communication. I'm also a member of the Loveland Fishing Club. That's a group of about 100 members. It's both a social group, fishing, eating, and it's philanthropic. We do things like the kids fishing derby, senior derby, and a lot of projects with the scouts helping the youngsters to fish. I think the combined element of being both a member of that and the Sportsman's group would be a positive thing also. My objectives to being in a round table, lost my place here, sorry. My objectives are the continued growth of fishing and hunting opportunities, hopefully through fee simple acquisitions, but long-term lease arrangements where more feasible. Education to the public of why hunting and fishing is essential to a healthy environment, wildlife populations. I'd like to help ensure that the wildlife arm of CPW is properly funding, both through the use of adequate license fees and also from the hunting, from the non-hunting public users that use the assets but don't pay. Some of that's been taken care of recently, and I'm glad to see that. I also like to ensure that the enforcement contingent of CPW continues to be adequately staffed and funded. Anyway, to sum up, I'd like very much to be able to share and coordinate information between the three groups I mentioned. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Jim. Oh. All right, appreciate it. So now, as I mentioned before, I will post, I'm putting in the chat, and everyone should be able to see it. I guess I should start off by saying, is there anyone who's an attendee currently who expected to be able to speak tonight, running to be a delegate who I've been in contact with who I missed? And if you would raise your hand, I can try to remedy that in case I missed anyone or you came in late and I didn't see you. You can also type it in the question or the chat section.
Kristen, in the interim, do you mind if I say a few words?
Sure, go for it.
This is exciting to hear folks that are on this call, and to hear your stories and your commitment to Colorado's natural resources is very exciting to me and the rest of us here. So again, I want to reiterate my thanks for all you do and what you're willing to do to help us out. Obviously, many of the things that you've listed that you have interest in are challenges that Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission and the agency, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, are dealing with on a daily basis, trying to resolve some issues between growing population levels in outdoor recreation and also balancing the wildlife resource and natural resource issues with those increases in activities and pressure on our resources. So it's very important that we have collaborative solutions to do this. We can't do it in a vacuum. We really need your support and to be able to communicate with you, because you all have a network of people and friends and cohorts that you deal with, that we can get the word out. We're trying to be diverse and trying to be responsive and work on issues that are near and dear to all of us. So I just want to reiterate my thanks to all of you for stepping up and volunteering to be on the unpaid Northeast Caucus. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. So again, just on logistics, and that went really pretty smoothly. So I really appreciate the people running for delegates all ready to go. This is the first time we're doing it this way, so we'll see if it stays that smooth through sort of the voting process. As you see in the chat, I did link to a Google Doc that has all the candidates' bios in it. If you can't open that, maybe you don't have Gmail, I will also be emailing that to participants at the end of the meeting. Additionally, I'm going to go ahead and post the link to the poll. And so of course they look like gobbledygook. Hang on, let me, just to give it a little bit more separation there. And you can vote starting now until 10 o'clock tonight or so. So if you would like to take time after the meeting or during the meeting to look over those bios, you'll have plenty of time to use that link and vote. And I will also email that link out so that if you're on the phone or it's not working to click on it in the comments for any reason, that you will have that after the meeting and should have time to vote for 2 delegates. And then we will let everyone know. Yes, and I see Brian, thank you. It looks like it's requesting an additional access. It might be because you're outside of the state system. So I will monitor that and give everyone access who has to request it. So just give me a few minutes on that. Thanks, Brian. And so as we move forward, we're right on schedule, which is great. And we'll start in with the Cameron Peak Fire updates. And again, as you have questions, if you want to post the question on the chat, if it's relevant to the topic at hand, we'll try to get it answered right away. If you just have a question that you want answered in general, we'll try to answer those at the end. And if we don't get to them, we will follow up with you after the meeting. So thanks. And with that, I will turn it over to Jason Surface and I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Kristen. So I'm Jason Surface. I'm the Area Wildlife Manager for Area 4, Fort Collins. So I have the distinction, if you will, of being the AWM that has Cameron Peak burning in his backyard. So I'm sure most of you have been following the fire throughout, I think it started August 12th, somewhere around there, if I remember correctly, or August 13th. Cause at this time is still under investigation, so we still don't know exactly what did cause it. Right now, as of the last update that they posted from the IC, is the fire is now at 127,000 acres and change, but they do have roughly 42% containment on it. And a lot of that is due to the fact that over the weekend, where they were expecting some hot, dry conditions and windy conditions, it actually turned out to be quite cool up there where the fire was burning. So they were able to jump on it and get some containment. The bad news is that the weather, the expected weather over the next few days does include hot, dry, and potentially some windy conditions. So we'll see what it does running into this weekend with first season. As far as the effect on the community and also hunting and fishing, there's several mandatory evacuations. Red Feather, Glacier View, Crystal Lakes are all under mandatory evacuations. So we've got folks that work in our Fort Collins office on Prospect that are actually staying with family or staying in hotels right now. So that entire area is under mandatory evacuation. Then there's some voluntary evacuations as well. The county and CSP have a lot of road closures that are in effect. So essentially getting to most of that area up there is pretty difficult right now. And if you've noticed on the news as well, there's a 150,000 acre fire burning in Wyoming called the Mullen Fire, which has essentially closed off everything just over our border to the north in Wyoming. And it hasn't gotten into Colorado on our side in Area 4, but it has gone down into North Park. So they have, I want to say, roughly 14 or 15% containment on that. So there's a lot of concern that if that fire for us, for our area, if it starts burning down the Laramie River Basin, that it could really compound our problems up here. So as far as the Forest Service closure, if you've noticed that, essentially for our GMUs over here, GMU 19 is pretty much in a complete closure. 7 and 8 are, I would say 7 with the road closures is completely closed. Unit 8 is about 75% closed. And this is, again, we're talking strictly Forest Service. And then about half of Unit 191 is closed. The difficult part is, even though some of these areas are open, like in Unit 8 or Unit 191, the county road closures make access pretty difficult at this point. So we're just trying to work with the Forest Service and work with the county in terms of keeping us posted and letting us, have some input in how these decisions are made. But at the end of the day, they're making their decisions based on human safety, and that's more important than our ability to get up and hunt elk, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I should say. As of right now, the state wildlife area that would be or could be affected by that is Cherokee State Wildlife Area. And as of right now, the access is still open to the state wildlife area. So until that changes or we feel that we're putting folks at risk, we'll continue to keep the property open. As far as licenses are concerned, if we've pretty much every deer and elk license that's in this area, for those Western units, I should say, and pronghorn licenses, we're offering refunds for those, where folks have the ability to put in for a refund the day before the season starts, in case these closures can change and things can open. And then as far as some of the more coveted licenses, our moose licenses, sheep licenses, those were same thing with refunds, but then we also offered the ability for folks to get vouchers. They're guaranteed the license next year if they do decide to turn it in. And it's hard to say what, I'm talking to some of the hunters out there. Some are going to roll the dice and try to get up in some of their areas, and with the exception of the units that are totally closed. And then, we've got some PLO licenses that go through to January. So I'm trying to be an optimist and hold out hope that maybe some folks will be able to get up there and hunt some of those later season licenses. But we'll see. I'm keeping in constant contact with the Forest Service, the supervisor here. So she's keeping me apprised of changing conditions. And I'm just keeping an eye on some of those late season tags. And if we need to put those on refund lists, we will. But as of right now, we're again, trying to be optimistic, which I know is hard in 2020, but I'm going to try. So we'll see. But I think that's about everything that there is on the Cameron Peak fire, unless anyone has any questions.
Hey, Kristen, can I jump in here real quick? Just want to say that, you know, Jason kind of alluded to it, though. The two places to get into North Park right now are through Rocky Mountain National Park or going over Willow Creek Pass. We've got our crews up there right now spawning brown trout at North Delaney. It's a, you know, pretty busy time for anglers to hit, you know, some of our more productive brown trout fisheries. But, you know, the crews are up there. We're doing what we need to do. But those are the two access points. So depending on, you know, if you're up north or if you're down in Denver, you know, you have to plan a little travel time, but there's definitely access and, you know, things are looking good as far as fishing and things like that.
Yeah, and you know, and the other thing I'll add, and Jeff, which thanks, one thing I forgot to mention is if you look at the incident map online and you see the outline of this fire, it gives the appearance that it's, even though the acreage is bad, yes. I mean, I think it's the third largest fire now in the state's history, I believe. And there's been, you know, 27 residents destroyed plus a couple of other buildings. But if you look at that map, it does give the impression that maybe it's worse than it actually appears. If you look at the Poudre River corridor, there really hasn't been a lot of burning right along the river. One of our state wildlife areas, the Bliss, we did lose an upper meadow. It's a small upper meadow. The hatchery that's within that outline of the fire is still standing. So, and there's still a lot of that upper Poudre River that is not in that fire zone. So, like Jeff said, as everything settles, I don't want looking at the map. Like I said, looking at the map gives the appearance that it's much worse than it actually is. And until this fire is out, which will probably be once we have lots of snow up there, it's going to be hard to really assess the damage until it's completely out and we have more access to it. So.
We had a question come in that Jason kind of alluded to, but Jeff, maybe you touch on just questions people are asking the status of the hatchery.
Yeah, so the hatchery.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff. The hatchery is still standing. We removed a lot of the brooder fish that we felt were at risk. And I think Jeff can talk more on that. And so as of now, the people are safe, the buildings are safe, and the fish are safe. Is that?
Yeah, that's accurate. And that's what I was going to just jump on real quick to kind of button up the fire conversation. Was we've depopulated all the fish that have been on surface water. So at the Poudre unit, most of those fish are on water that comes off the Poudre. And our concern is basically, you know, from having a snow event or a big rain event and, you know, getting an ash flow that would kill all those brooders. Those fish have been depopulated. Most of them went to Carr Lake. We do have a small population of fish inside the unit that are on well water. And luckily to this point, staff have been able to travel up the canyon mainly on a daily basis, just, you know, to make sure that their facilities, their houses, things like that are still in, you know, functioning order. So it's been a challenge for that crew up there. Commend them. For the sportsmen though, you know, we've basically depopulated that situation. The next big one that we're concerned about is Watson, because that pulls water off of the Poudre as well into Watson Lake and then through the Watson facility. Usually once the water hits Watson Lake, we've got about a 2 to 3 day window where we can shut the gates from water coming into the river, recirculate that water, and then get those fish off. So we're coming up with plans right now of where to put those fish. So everything's kind of in flux right now, but, you know, we're looking ahead. I think we've learned a lot from the High Park fire. We've learned a lot from the Hayman fire, you know, as far as fish management and things like that. But, you know, we're doing the best we can. We just don't know what Mother Nature's going to throw at us at any given day.
And I would add to what Jason and Jeff said as well. Those of you that were around during the High Park fire and the Hayman before that, I want you to understand that we work closely with the Forest Service, even in the aftermath of these fires, because just because the fire's over, and we know it will be hopefully soon with some snow or rain, the resource assessment, the damage assessment that has to take place for safety, culverts, burned timber, those kinds of things for the Forest Service to be able to get in there and make sure those resources and those access points are safe to get in. We work with the Forest Service very closely throughout that process. So I'm thinking next year, the year after that, so I wouldn't expect that just because the fire's out this winter, that next spring or, by May or June, the Forest Service is going to be able to say, you can get back into all that country. So I would just set that expectation that, there's a lot of evaluation that still needs to take place.
Thank you. And then we did have one additional question, kind of relating to the Cameron Peak fire, and maybe Jason or Kristen, this would be best addressed for you. And it was just, how many hunters do you expect will end up turning in their tags? And do you see this as a substantial impact as far as revenue?
It's hard to say right now. I haven't looked at the latest that as far as hunters that turned in their tags or not. I would say with the sheep hunters that I know of, it's been about half and half. I haven't looked at the moose hunters, so I don't know if a lot of them have or not. Deer and elk, it seems like we're getting a mix as far as, talking to the customer service reps at the front desk. They'll get days where they'll get a handful of people come in and turn them in, and then they'll get days where they don't. I think, first rifle I think that'll be the test is what we see getting turned in for first rifle, second rifle. A lot of the muzzleloader hunters and archery hunters still went out. Obviously archery, they had a lot of that forest was still open for them. Probably a good chunk of the muzzleloader hunters, because they still had access to some of that stuff in 7 and 8. They were still going out, but that closure's been greatly expanded since those early seasons. And not only just the Forest Service closure, but the road closures have really been expanded since those early seasons. So I think we'll probably see quite a few more folks turning in their licenses as these rifle seasons progress. From a revenue standpoint, we are getting a lot of them that are just trading the licenses for the counter tag. So, when you look at it from that point, it's not impacting us, but I don't know. I haven't really looked at the total numbers, so I couldn't really venture a guess on what that would do as far as the impact to revenue. I don't think it'll be that significant. I think it sounds much worse than it is, because we're just one section of the state. And a lot of those hunters may exchange licenses. A lot of them are doing that. They'll buy licenses in other areas. So, I think just big picture, I don't think will really have much of an impact on our revenues. We're just one small area within the state, so I don't think it'll be that significant.
Thank you, Jason.
It looks like, and I apologize if this question was just answered, but we have someone asking, do returned tags get resold?
No. So with this, in general they do, but with the fire, we have the ability to make decisions as to whether we want to reissue the tags. And the decision was made between, myself and Mark and Kristen when we first started discussing this. We made the decision that we don't want to reissue these, because the thought then is that we would just be refunding it for somebody else if the fire continued to grow and the closures continued to grow. So we did not reissue any of these licenses.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, comments, some appreciations for the vouchers for next year, but Okay, to keep us on track, I think I'll turn it over to Shannon and John Runge, and they're going to give us some update on CWD in the state, in the region, and some interesting work we've been doing. Take
Thank
it away.
you, Kristen. Hi, everybody. This is Shannon Schaller, and I am the Senior Terrestrial Wildlife Biologist in the region. And I have just a couple of slides I'd like to share with you. So, Jason, am I okay to share my screen?
Yes.
Oop, it's saying my screen sharing is disabled. I don't need to. If you tell me I can, it's okay. I can meander through.
Let me go through and add you as a.
Okay. Well, let me get started, and then if it works, I can share my screen. That's okay.
Shannon, I just added you as a co-host, so you should be able to share now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. As Kristen said, I'm here to talk a little bit about a chronic wasting disease update from a statewide level and then the Northeast region. But first I wanted to start a little bit with the status of our herds in the region and then some of our management issues with managing those herds because they have a nexus to how we are managing CWD and now and into the future. And some good news after listening to some, troubling news about fires and how everything's going there is that, we're really lucky in the Northeast region that most of our herds for our big game species are doing really well. And, a couple of factors that contribute to that is that in general, our big game species experience milder winters than they do in other areas of the state. And then also we haven't experienced the prolonged drought like some of the other areas in the state. So what that translates into is, for deer, our deer are performing really well. Our fawn to doe ratios are much higher than the statewide average, and same with our buck to doe ratios, that they're higher than the statewide averages. For elk, our elk are doing well, but we're more in line with what the statewide averages are for our calves to cows and then our bull to cow. And same with our pronghorn. We're right within our averages of where we've been over the last 3 to 5 years, but doing well. Another species that's doing really well in the state and in the Northeast region is moose. Their numbers continue to increase statewide, and fortunately for us, so do license numbers. They're not quite keeping up with the demand of 25,000 applications, but we're doing our best to put licenses out there. We also provide great watchable opportunity with our moose. And I guess the important thing to know about how well our herds are doing is that you'll see that translate into our license allocation. So our license allocations in general are more status quo or increases directly related to how well our herds are performing. And when I talk about management issues, Mark talked about this a little bit. We deal with a lot of people on the landscape, and then what I just talked about, wildlife on the landscape. And that's one of our bigger challenges in managing these productive herds is with harvest being our main tool in managing herds, we have some challenges within the region, and that's related to having some unhuntable lands, whether it be an open space property or any other land management agency that doesn't allow hunting, or sometimes even private property. As far as the people go, we just have a lot of people out there, and so managing recreation and people on the landscape is one of our biggest challenges. And it's related to the decisions that we make with either licenses or seasons and allocation, is trying to overcome some of the challenges that we have there and manages our herds within our objective levels that are set forth in our herd management plans. So one of the bigger issues and management challenges that we have in the agency is dealing with chronic wasting disease. In 2017, we initiated statewide mandatory testing, and we did that because over the period of time, for the last 10 to 15 years previous to 2017, our data just became unreliable as far as what prevalence rates were. And all indications were that prevalence rates were increasing in some herds across the state. And we wanted to get a better understanding of really what are these prevalence rates doing and where do we have what we would consider higher prevalence rates. And then again, how would we manage to reduce prevalence rates or at least keep them from increasing? So in 2017, it initiated statewide mandatory testing. And as of February 2020, we've detected CWD in 33 of our 54 deer herds and 14 of our 43 elk herds. And if you look at this illustration, that the top portion is deer herds and the darker colored purple is higher prevalence rates. And if you look at the northeast corner of the state, you will see that we have some of the higher prevalence rates in the entire state. Now, one caveat I will say to that is we have not conducted mandatory sampling in every unit across the state. So the Southwest region and the remainder of the Northwest region are getting sampled this year. And then also South Park is getting sampled this year. So after 2020 season, we will have prevalence estimates for all of our Northeast region deer herds, which will be pretty important for us to understand where to go with our management. A few things that we're learning with CWD, and it's a constant learning thing with CWD, is that, you know, all the evidence is showing us is that doing nothing can be pretty catastrophic to herds, and that making sure that we keep track of what our prevalence is and then institute management strategies to reduce prevalence or keep it from climbing is our best chance at keeping populations from crashing. One of the documents that we use to help us understand where to direct our management strategies is from our 2019 Cpw Cwd Response Plan. And a couple of key points that are important to know about this plan is that it's very adaptable and flexible to what we see in the field and the constraints of each herd in the DAU and how you can actually work at reducing prevalence. But kind of one of the biggest thing is that management action is to be taken when prevalence is at 5% or above. And in every single one of the DAUs in the Northeast region where we have prevalence estimates, we are at 5% or greater. And like I said, we have some of the highest prevalence rates in the entire state. The Northeast corner of the state has some DAUs with 20 to 25 and even 30% CWD. So it's really important for us in the region to pay attention to this plan. The plan works in concert with our herd management plans, but in general, the plan directs us to use a suite of options to reduce prevalence or to keep it from climbing, some of which include reducing concentrations of deer. And I talked about these open space and other parcels where animals concentrate. So directing harvest toward areas where animals concentrate, directing harvest toward male animals, because what we're understanding is that prevalence is higher in males than in females, and at the rate of at least 2 times the rate as in females. We can also move licenses around throughout the seasons and direct harvest toward a time of the year when infection rates may be higher, which could include a rut and, when males might be in contact with more females. And so you'll see our license allocation really will follow this plan and our herd management plans to see if we can reduce some of these really high prevalence rates that we have. As I said, we have the distribution of animals on the landscape and challenges with achieving harvest that we have to work around, which make it important for our field staff to work with other agencies and work with landowners to figure out those strategies. We will test again in 5 years. So a DAU or herd will get tested, and then in 5 years we'll repeat that testing. And then we're hoping to learn something about implementing some of these actions and then figuring out if we were effective in reducing prevalence. I hit on some of this as far as the Northeast region, that we'll have all of our herds tested by the end of this year. South Park is the last one to get tested. We'll repeat it in 5 years. The reason I thought it was important to talk about some of those management consideration is we have these productive herds. So reducing abundance, so the number of animals on the landscape is also one strategy to reducing CWD prevalence rates. But in every single one of our DAUs in the Northeast region, we are either at the very upper end of our sex ratio objective or exceed it in nearly all of our DAUs. And so if we're trying to reduce the number or reduce prevalence, and one of the strategies is directing harvest toward males, and we already have a high number of males on the landscape, you can see where that's a major management consideration for us as we talk through license allocation each year and work with landowners on access and work with other agencies. And then that deer distribution on the landscape, we get areas in the Northeast region where we do have concentrating animals, so likely that's contributing to higher infection rates. And kudos to our field staff for really working with being creative and instituting new hunts where we can shift harvest maybe in one area of the DAU to another area of the DAU where it might be a hot spot, or incentivize harvest. So we have to be nimble and adaptable, but we don't know everything about chronic wasting disease. We do know a lot, and we're learning. And like I said, over the next 5 years, as we work toward moving within our objective ranges, we're hoping to reduce prevalence or at least keep it from climbing some of our DAUs. And as an agency, I would say that continuing to understand chronic wasting disease and how to manage it is extremely important. And we're fortunate to have a staff that, lead the nation in research as it relates to chronic wasting disease. And recently our own staff published a paper that evaluated prevalence rates with CWD and then the nexus to license allocation. So our state vet, Mike Miller, our big game manager, Andy Holland, our terrestrial programs manager, Matt Eckert, and then our own John Runge, our biometrician, put together a publication that really suggests that hunting pressure, whether it's increased or decreased, has an effect on prevalence in herds. And we have John Runge with us tonight, and so I will kick it over to him to see if he can give you a little bit more detail on it, because it's a pretty fascinating way to look at how our management can affect prevalence of CWD.
All right, hi everybody. My name is John Runge, and as Shannon mentioned, I'm the statistical analysis analyst for the terrestrial branch in Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Can you see my screen that I'm sharing right now?
John, we can see it, but you might need to hit present because we see the PowerPoint layout.
Gotcha. All right, I'm showing you a version of a Mike Miller slideshow. I've kind of reduced the number of slides for everybody. But so when this project kicked off, as Shannon mentioned, we were looking at some potential correlations between our management and CWD prevalence in a variety of units across Colorado. Hunting units, game management units. I'll show you a map in a few slides here. So the first thing we wanted to look at was, okay, what is the relationship between, we're kind of talking about a variety of factors, but what we settled on was licenses sold, because that is a good hard number that we know every year from the 90s and even before to the present for any given unit. So we look at a variety of license combinations to see which fit best. 4th season, late season, all late season, 3rd and late season, everything all licensed together. And what we found was that 3rd season licenses had the best correlation with chronic wasting disease prevalence, just kind of across the whole state, and kind of a very rough analysis. And Andy Holland, our big game manager, said that made sense, that a lot of times when people do set license numbers, thinking about things like CWD, they focus on third season licenses. And I'm sure some of the DWMs and AWMs here can, and Shannon as well, can hopefully corroborate that. So that's what we settled on. It had the best correlation. And at that point, we said, okay, let's start drilling down and looking at certain units and the correlation between how many third season licenses were sold and chronic wasting disease prevalence. So as a kind of a first pass at it, we looked at Hunt Code 9, which is GMUs 9, 19, and 191. The reason we grouped them by Hunt Code was because I think as some of you know, these Hunt codes, all these GMUs have the same license allocation in third season. So that just makes it easy to group them. And it gives us a bigger sample size from a statistician perspective. And so just looking at, kind of rough patterns to start, we noticed, here's your, in black, your number of third season licenses over the years from 2002 to 2018 for 9. And then as well, we were looking at 12. So what we wanted to do is kind of look at areas where licenses either stayed the same and gone up, and another type of area where licenses have gone down. And then compare this red line to prevalence. And so kind of with this first rough analysis, we saw that like in these two units, prevalence is going down in 9, and this is targeted due to the CWD rates that we're seeing there in the early 2000s, while licenses were either maintaining a steady level or going up. Whereas over in Hunt Code 12, GMUs 12, 13, 23, 24, licenses had gone down, and this was, honestly in response to mule deer populations declining. But as that happened, chronic wasting disease prevalence went up. So we said, okay, we should probably do a more thorough analysis over a variety of units. The takeaway from this was from the preliminary analysis, we were seeing a definite effect of licenses on CWD. So we tossed it around for a while, and we picked several, like 12 license groups that had not changed in terms of what GMUs were in them from 2002 until 2018. And it actually ended up being 2000 and 2018 because we go back 2 years, and I'll explain that in a second when we look at license numbers. Well, actually, I'll just set that up right now. So the idea is, and this is Mike Miller's idea, was that the license you set this year, the license that you sell this year, don't have an effect on prevalence this year. It takes a year or two to see that effect through the population, right? You reduce the population a little bit this year, you're going to see reduced CWD prevalence, hypothetically, the next year and the year after. So we averaged, so if we were analyzing 2002 prevalence, we averaged the number of licenses sold in 2000 and 2001 in the third season to compare that with the prevalence in 2002. So we use these 12 hunt codes that we found across the Northeast and Northwest that had not changed in terms of their GMU composition in the third season over that 18-year period. And I'll just jump to the straight to the results. If anybody wants to know the statistical techniques, you can ask me later, but I'll end up diving into the weeds if I describe it now. So this is what we came out with, and these are the results of the statistical models in each of these license groupings. On the y-axis, you've got the prevalence predicted by the model. And just a brief explanation of what statistical models do. When you fit all these data, 18 years worth of data, to a statistical model, it'll provide you a smooth line. You can view that as prediction. It's something that happened in the past, but you can view it as a prediction of what might happen in the future, or perhaps in another unit, if it's a similar unit. And we found very significant correlations between increasing numbers of licenses and decreasing prevalence in 6 of these units: 4, 5, 9, 11, 12, and 41. So you got 4 here. So we have Craig right here. Here's 4, 5, 9 is over by Fort Collins. 12, the country just east of Meeker, South Craig, and what did I say? 41 is the other one. Yeah, 41. So this area between Grand Junction, kind of the Aspen Valley. In the other units, we didn't necessarily find statistical significant relationships, but in 4 more of those 12 units, the pattern was exactly as we expected. More licenses, less prevalence. Oh, sorry, 3 of those others. And then in the remaining 3, and we don't know why this is, it just wasn't a perfect correlation across all these hunt codes. it actually, we saw prevalence increasing with increased licenses, which is the opposite of what we expect. But in general, 6 out of the 12 units, we saw what we expected. Increased licenses, less prevalence, statistically significant. 3 of the units, the same pattern, 3 of the units, the opposite. A lot of noise in this. You're gonna, if you think about it, you're gonna say, well, what about density? Why didn't you guys include density in this analysis? And the reason for that is that our estimates of, total number of animals in any given unit, or density, which are kind of the same thing, that's just total animals divided by the area. They're all estimated, and they're estimated from models. And when you start fitting one estimate and try to estimate trends off of it, you really need to do a lot more of an advanced analysis, and you lose a lot of power to detect trends. Because and we don't do this, but if we did calculate our uncertainty, say our statistical variance in our density estimates in a unit, we would see it's probably quite large. So we probably wouldn't, and we'd have to include that in the statistical analysis. So it would essentially negate any ability to detect trends. So that's why we didn't include density or total animals, which would be the obvious other one to include. Same thing with hunting pressure. We don't know the exact numbers of hunters in every single GMU because hunters spread out among the GMUs given a certain license code. So we couldn't include that, but that too might have an effect. Anyway, given that it was a very simple analysis, it was simply license code and yearly trend regressed against a prevalence. We saw a pretty strong effect in a lot of these units. So certainly it's a correlational study, and we could gain more power if we did experimentation. But just going off of that, I think we conclude that in most of our units, increasing hunting pressure is going to result in lower CWD risk. Similarly, any emergent epidemic can be suppressed by maintaining pressure on the affected herd. And this is not a big revelation in the field of population ecology. I mean, we've all heard it before. Any increasing population is going to be more susceptible to disease of any species of animal, be it humans, be it anything. I mean, we all know this from basic biology, basic ecology. So it kind of comes as no surprise. And so the one thing that we could add is that anytime we get more mature bucks, and this is based upon some of the evidence or some of the facts that Shannon showed you, CWD is more prevalent in mature bucks. So the more that it's twice as prevalent in bucks as it is in does, and the older bucks tend to get it more. They just have more chances to pick this thing up in the environment over the course of their life. So anytime we have too many mature bucks in the population, we're going to get more CWD. And if there's more animals in the population, there's just more chances for it to spread. So I think, at least with this study, with this paper, we show that there's at least a correlation between increasing hunting pressure and minimizing risk of CWD in the population. It'd be nice to do more experiments in a management setting, but certainly sometimes we can't afford that, and we just have to go ahead with the management. But 6 out of 12 is pretty good, and then 9 out of 12 if you throw in the 3 units that weren't statistically significant. It's probably enough to go on given all the noise that we have out there in nature. Any questions?
Doesn't look like there's any questions coming in yet. There were a couple submitted earlier that got answered as the presentations went along.
So John, this is Mark, and I just wanted to, I guess state the obvious, but embedded in this discussion of the data and the biology is also the human dimensions aspect of managing wildlife and CWD, and the desire for hunters to have larger, male animals in the population and access and all those kinds of things on the Eastern Plains. So what the commission and the division obviously have to balance here is the need to manage this disease as per our CWD plan with, what the public will tolerate and support. So I just want to mention that the science is what it is, and our CWD plan that was approved by the commission really mandates that we work towards managing this disease to 5% or lower prevalence level out there. Doing that on the ground sometimes can be a little bit challenging, but I just wanted to mention that, you know, there's the other factors into the management as well.
Yeah, of course. I don't mean to present this as if it's a single objective exercise. I think we all know that wildlife management has a lot of objectives in it, and the human dimension and what hunters want is certainly one of them. There is evidence that if you let it go too much, then you're looking at exponential growth, and it's going to go throughout the population. And then in the long run, you're not going to have as much hunting opportunity if you did as you would have had you, kept it within a certain allowable level.
Absolutely, and all we have to do is look at other jurisdictions that may not have taken this as seriously as we did early on and see what the effects are. So,
right, exactly.
Thank you. Great job.
Thanks.
Okay, so not seeing any other questions on that. Thanks everybody for hanging in. We are on track to be done by 8 o'clock. So if you just want to hang in there for a couple more topics, we've got some interesting things to talk about. And I did want to call out that the link to voting for the delegates is still in the comment section, and I will share that again at the end, and I will email it to participants as well if you were here earlier. So next we're going to turn it over to Joe Padilla, and I'll let Joe introduce himself, and he's going to talk to us about a really unique situation going on in Boulder County and some opportunity we've had there.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll need to share my screen here in a little bit as well. But as Mark said in the introduction, I'm the District Wildlife Manager for Longmont South in Boulder County. And I'm really excited because I get to share with you, I think, an important project that we're working on right now to help manage elk in conjunction with Boulder County up in my district. I've been in this district for about, I think, 4 years now, and it really started once I transferred over and has kind of grown to the point where it is now. So it's taken that bit of a timeline to get the planning and to get this program in place. So I'm going to share my screen and get started on this.
You should be able to share it now.
Okay. All right, so Red Hill elk management in Boulder County. So this picture kind of shows what the issue is with this situation. So you look at elk that are hanging out in a prairie dog town, you look in the background and you see the foothills where I think they should be. This property that they're on is also a Boulder County open space property that is an agricultural property. You look in some of the buildings and there's actually haystacks. You can see the round bales there. The big challenge here is that these elk are actually just north of Niwot, which is quite a ways east of the foothills and where we want them. This herd, and the issue with it is that they are a resident herd, meaning that they're also non-migratory. So we can deal with the issues if these elk are coming down in the winter time using the area's winter range and then going back to the high country. But we have a population of elk that have decided that a lot of the agricultural lands well east of Highway 36 and the foothills and the high country is a good place to make a living as well. And we're seeing a population that's not only stable, but it showed signs of growing over the 4 years where they really became an issue. So why do we have the Red Hill elk management? Well, that's essentially it. I want to show you this next graph that kind of shows you what the actual issue is in numbers. So if you look at May of 2018 on this graph, we went out and just were doing ground counts, essentially looking at elk. They're pretty easy to find in some of this habitat where they are. It's fairly open and we can get access to these smaller parcels of private property to find them. You look at May 18 and that's right, just under 15 individuals that we're accounting under 50 individuals. We did counts, as you can see on those months there on the bottom part of the graph, with an increasing population as we got into November. Now, what those numbers represent are the migratory elk as they come down and use the area for winter range. So throughout the winter, we have this more elevated population. So then we came back the following year, and we were even looking in the spring to see what those numbers look like. And that got us down into June, and you look at that, and that's actually over 100 individuals. So you compare that to May of 2018 to June of 2019. I'm not the best mathematician, but you go from 50 to 100, and that's a pretty substantial increase, right? And that's not all attributed to just cows having calves either. Another concern of ours is that some of these migratory elk were actually choosing to stay longer and just stay permanently and actually contribute to the resident non-migratory elk herds. That continued into July 2019 and on. We did do counts again this year with very similar, with a similar trend. The numbers I don't have right offhand, but we were still able to go out during the summer months and find elk. The other thing to note, what are elk doing in May that's a concern? Well, they're having calves. So they're not only resident and staying here, but they're having calves and learning to become resident elk that way. So that's kind of the problem that we were faced with. Now, how did we go about trying to manage these elk in this resident elk herd? The first thing we had to do is incorporate this area into this hunt code. It's EF020L3R, which we call our subunit, and I may say that throughout the talk here, but we call it our subunit of Unit 20. The district and where Red Hill is in comparison to this is going to be south of Highway 66, kind of along Highway 36 there. You see that big flat area kind of in the lower left-hand corner near Neva Road and Niwot Road. That's an area we call Table Mountain, and I'll zoom in. I'm going to zoom in on that area here so you can actually see what we're looking at. So what we did is we expanded that subunit to incorporate this area here so we could use those licenses to start getting after these elk that were part of Red Hill. These properties are all on Boulder County open space. So the blue ones you see on the screen, these are various properties that Boulder County either owns outright, and that's most of them, but they do have some agricultural tenants on some of these properties as well. And these are the properties that we're looking at. They also own the areas in the green. Those are open space properties as well, but they are not part of the Red Hill area. Highway 36 kind of goes right in between our area here. So that's a consideration that we had to look at when we were talking about hunting these elk. The kind of white yellow portion right down below at the bottom of the screen, that table near Nelson Road, that is Table Mountain. It's owned by Department of Commerce. It's a federal property. So the elk do use that, but it's not part of the open space program and the hunting. We created in Boulder, having had Rabbit Mountain and Ron Stewart, having that hunting program already in place, drew up a plan that was unique to this situation. Took that to the county and the commissioners there, and we got approval to hunt in this Red Hill area for 2 years. After that 2 years, we're just going to evaluate it even after one and make changes as we go to see where we are. The goal here is to get to 25 resident elk. We feel that's a number that's manageable for the area and that can sustain and give us a long-term number, I think, to try to reach. We're hunting these elk from August 15th through October 31st. That subunit license itself goes from August 15th through January 31. If you remember the graph where I showed you where we had that big peak of numbers, those migratory elk are coming down. we're targeting these resident elk. So we wanted to target our hunting activities before a majority of our migratory elk actually come down and want to use this for winter range. So that's why we're only hunting on these open space properties till the 31st. We're limited to short range methods of take. That was a concession we really needed to make, I think, to address safety concerns in the private land adjacent to these open space properties. And I think on some of these properties, it was a good concession to make. We again will evaluate that, and as part of the approval, we can look at, the door's open, I guess, to look at other methods of take from there. Short range methods, what does that mean? For the program, it's archery, muzzle loader, and shotguns with slugs. As with Rabbit Mountain, a shooting proficiency test is required from all hunters, along with additional training in the way of an orientation meeting. When we give a hunter an orientation, imagine when you go to hunt on private property, you meet with your private property, your landowner, and you ask them what their expectations are of you on their property. That's exactly what this is. So even though it's open space and we think of it as a public hunt on public property, we're essentially dealing with a private landowner that has additional rules and expectations of hunters on their property. And a lot of those are safety type reasons. If you want information on this, I think this is the biggest thing, is just to kind of get the word out of this program. The management plan itself is online. There's way more in that and a lot more details how we got here than I can cover in my time here. I think the important part to think about is this wasn't just a, okay, let's do this, let's get approval, and we're off and rolling. If you've been a part of the county process, you know, you come up with the plan and then you have to go through steps and get approval along the way in order to do this. And we started this, I think, officially in November of 2019. It took that long even to get to where we could get a plan on paper and get going. As you remember, we were getting counts and we knew about this issue well before that. So it takes time. You go to the Boulder County Parks and Open Space, you imagine they're the landowner and they administer a lot of the hunt. The management plan is on there in detail, so you can go through and see a lot more numbers and justifications for what we're doing and why. And also, if you're a hunter and want to participate in the program, all the information you need is there. Dave Horath is a wildlife biologist there, and he's a wealth of information. He knows these open space properties like the back of his hand. And then right now, Jenny Dalton is actually a designated hunt coordinator who just manages the Rabbit Mountain hunts and this one as well within the county. Tremendous resource, and I don't know, they just put their phone number right on the website there, so you can call them and get them as well. So I feel bad if I didn't do the same. So there's my contact information. I'm available email or cell phone. I'm more than happy to talk a lot more about this program. It's a really important one, I think, for me, and just trying to manage these elk. Just some highlights as far as how you participate. Step number one is you need to apply for that subunit license. That's the EF 020L3R. We have all of the hunters we need this year, and the program is up and running, and we won't, I guess, look into taking any more hunters until we get to next year and what that's going to look like. After you have the draw, I send Boulder County the successful list, and from there we send out an email where you can declare your interest in trying to participate in this hunt. After that, it's a draw just by lottery, so there's no preference points. It's strictly luck of the draw. We do have some hunters who have been participating every single year through the Rabbit Mountain portion, and are, I guess they're fortunate to get it every single year as well. So at that point, you sign up for your week to hunt. That's about the timeline and how long you get to do it. And after you do that, then we do the shooting proficiency, and you do the other training where you get to see the properties in person. Just updates on how it's going so far. Boulder County sends out an update every week. I didn't see it this week, so it was up to me and my numbers. So these are pretty close regardless. We've had about 27 hunters total on Red Hill. Rabbit Mountain has just started. On Red Hill, we've had about 10 elk harvested. Doesn't sound like a lot, and that success percentage is right on par with, I guess, what you would see statewide with elk. I do know of some other elk that have been harvested in adjacent private properties, which is a huge benefit to what we're doing. Even though we're not necessarily harvesting elk directly on these open spaces, it keeps these elk moving around the landscape. And that makes them available to other hunters. In the subunit itself, we issued 400 licenses for elk in this subunit. Boulder County Open Space has about 125 hunters in their program. So by doing that and having that number, we wanted to make those licenses available to landowners. And if those landowners don't hunt themselves, but know hunters or have friends that are hunters, they can have them out. So when these elk are on their properties, they can manage them how they need to or how they want to. This has been really successful in keeping the elk moving and also helping the landowners prevent some of the damage that they were seeing to haystacks and just other property on their land. And that's been really cool to see landowners taking an active role in management of wildlife on their, not only on their property, but just within their neighborhood and within the subunit. We've had landowners that, when we first started with this, we were strictly talking non-lethal means, and we've tried all that, done all that, and they have elevated and are open to hunting, may not be hunting themselves, but we've had some harvest where they aren't hunting, but they've had public hunters on their place, and that's been a direct benefit to our public hunters through this program. And I think if there's one thing I'm proud of, that's probably it right there. It's taken a lot of us, so I'm talking about it right now, but when we've gone and had some of these meetings, both in the commission, through Boulder County Commission, and some of our other even town hall type meetings and public meetings, this is who comes and represents us. So we have Boulder County and their Parks and Open Space representatives. There's myself and Jason Deach, my boss, Kristen Cannon before, and I think Mark has even been to several of these as far as our representation and support of the county for this program. Table Mountain is working well within their limitations to be a good neighbor with our property owners as well. So there are limitations for them, but they are interested in helping out how they can, and that's mainly by non-lethal means. Our private landowners, several of them have bought in directly to this and are taking a very active role, and we're seeing management. It's a small piece, when I show the map, even within the subunit, but it's a landscape scale, I think, as far as I'm looking at when we look at this herd and where they're moving. And then I can't thank Boulder Rifle Club and Greenville Sportsman Club enough for just the role they've had in helping us get our hunters to go through their shooting proficiency tests. And there have been, with 125 hunters, that's a lot of shooting tests. So having both of them and being more than welcome to have us out there and our hunters go through and being supportive that way is huge. And that's it. So I'll take any questions we may have that are coming in.
Great. Thanks, Joe. We do have some questions. And I wanted to start off with a question that was asked ahead of time before the meeting. And I think it was asked again in the comments. So hopefully we can get two questions here. And it's, maybe Jason and Shannon can help answer this as well, because it's related to the subunit itself, which also includes the Rabbit Mountain program. So they're related, but sort of different. And it says, the C-list cow elk license valid for Unit 20 for the Boulder County Open Space had a large quota this year, around 400 licenses. The open space could only accommodate a much smaller number of hunters. And is it, you know, should we be doing I guess, a better job of making sure people understand their odds? And what is the recourse? I'm adding some of these questions, I apologize, but what is the recourse maybe for a hunter who drew the license and then did not get the permission to hunt on the open space or in the Red Hill program? And do we have any plans for the quota next year? So I don't know who wants to grab that first.
I guess I can start and then we'll let folks fill in. I think as far as plans for the quota next year, we treat the subunit just like we would any other GMU or as far as counts. We need to get through the hunting season and then see where we are as far as numbers of elk and how close we are to our management goals within that subunit. That's going to really drive the number of licenses there. Boulder County has 125 hunters on their program. So I went to look at the stats, and within either first choice or second choice, all of our licenses, our 400 licenses got taken. So after that, we sent out letters and notifications to those hunters, notifying them of these programs, along with how they can declare their interest. Once that went through, then we sent another letter telling them what they were able to do if they were not successful. That option included turning in their license or even doing an exchange for a different license they may have wanted. Boulder County did set up what they called a help program. Oh, geez, I should have remembered what that stood for. Hunters and landowners is basically the gist of the program, was getting hunters and landowners together. So if we had a landowner that needed help with elk management and they were willing to have a hunter on, then we could draw from a pool of hunters that was signed up for this program, put them together so they could help solve each other's issue, I guess, as far as using licenses. So once we get into next year, I think there's only so many we can handle. I want there to be plenty of licenses available for landowners so they can manage these elk on their properties as well. And I think that's also why we saw the number we did, to make sure there were licenses to go around that way as well. So I don't know, Jason, you want to add anything? Or Kristen, I guess you were.
Yeah, I think you did a great job answering that. And for the sake of time, maybe we'll move on to some of the other questions, but we can continue that discussion and follow up as needed. But I thought that was a great answer. Was the increase in elk due to it being a safe area? So I don't want to interpret, but like, were the elk increasing in number because it was a bit of a refuge?
Yeah, exactly. And the refuge is exactly how we describe it. A lot of these open space properties that are in Red Hill were formerly, they're private before they were acquired as open space. And on those properties, there historically was hunting. Not necessarily a lot, but it was enough to not only get some harvest, but residually it lets the elk know that is probably not the safest place to be. And it moves them to other areas. Once the acquisition, they were turned into open space, there was no hunting once that happened. So we have that window there where, and they're smart, they figure out, we're even seeing that now as we hunt, where they're finding the little properties and the safety areas where our hunters can't get to them, even within open space. And that's exactly what we saw. Table Mountain was identified as another area where the elk could go and stay with zero disturbance, zero hunting, zero harvest. And then in the evenings and at nighttime, they were going down onto the lower agricultural areas and grazing in some of the fields there, and even getting into some of the haystacks. And we had damage situations there as well.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. And one last question, and then we'll let you off the hot seat. Why did you limit the hunt to inline muzzle loaders and no lead?
We were not limited to inline muzzle loaders. I recommended that based on what it was going to take to pass the proficiency test. And I think as I explain this, if you call me on the phone or you talk to other hunters that talk to me on the phone, this is a management hunt, which is different from, I think, our perception of hunting as a recreational pursuit. If I was telling hunters, if there's an elk at 100 yards, I need you to be able to get that elk. The program needs that in order for us to meet management goals. So I made recommendations as far as what would make our hunters successful, not only in passing the test, but in successful in what they're probably going to see in the field, especially in some of the open country where these elk are. And that's the ability to make a shot at that 100 yards. So we welcomed, I didn't put limitations on the muzzle except for, we did recommend lead-free ammunition. The reasoning there is in every single one of these areas, we have nesting bald eagles. So we did that out of concerns for lead poisoning. We see that at Rabbit Mountain as well, and that's the primary reason for that. It's a challenge to find some of that ammo to use it, but it's out there, and we, working with the hunters, were able to get them lined up and to get it.
Great. Well, thank you, Joe. Really appreciate that, and appreciate all the information. We're gonna move on to the next item, and it is, we're just gonna give some brief state wildlife area updates. And I can start out and I can be pretty brief. I just wanted to update everyone here on the Boulder State Wildlife Area lease. So Beaudecker Reservoir in Loveland, kind of northwest Loveland, or just west, southwest Loveland, west-west, is a state wildlife area, but it is owned by Home Supply Reservoir and Ditch Company. And we had a lease with them for a number of years to operate it as a state wildlife area. And it's not completely official yet, but we are on the home stretch of renewing that lease with Home Supply. And so we expect that Boulder is going to stay open and stay a state wildlife area with wakeless boating and fishing and some limited hunting opportunities for, at least the next 10 years with the option to renew for 20. So I know there's a lot of local interest in that property. We had a lot of support. And I got to say the city, the county, and the local communities around there were really great about just giving us the nod and supporting us on that. And so it's been approved by the commission. We're just kind of waiting for final approvals at the state level, and then that will be in place. So Boulder is going to be around for a little while to come. So if that's your favorite place, please continue to visit it. And that's what I just wanted to share on Boulder. And then we've got Todd Schmidt from the Eastern Lands to kind of update us on what the state wildlife areas look like out his way.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Again, my name's Todd Schmidt. I'm the area wildlife manager out of Brush. And out here on the Eastern Plains, some of the great things that we have to offer you is waterfowl hunting and waterfowl opportunities. As you know, much of Colorado is in a drought. And out here on the plains, we're feeling it very severely. And our reservoirs that we typically use for irrigation and flooding some of our shallow wetlands have been going dry. Thankfully, you guys had some snow back along the Front Range back in early September, and it warmed up and it came out my way through the South Platte. And we have been very fortunate to have a little bit of a water surge, if you will, over the last several weeks. And that has allowed us to fill up some of our shallow wetlands for hunting opportunities. So that's really the great news. Prior to that, I was not looking forward to my update because it was really dry. But again, that water has allowed us to put some water in our shallow wetlands. And as you know, the first split of duck season starts Saturday, and people are filling up our reservations, and I'm really glad to see that. So thank you all for supporting us and for coming out and enjoying some small game hunting out here in Area 3. Thanks, Kristen.
Great. And then we had just asked Jason Surface to come on and sort of talk about the new regulation this year for the state wildlife areas that required a hunting or fishing license, and any information that might be relevant to that.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So as I'm sure as everybody on this call knows, that in July, as of July 1, CPW required hunting and fishing licenses to access all state wildlife areas and state trust lands that we have rec leases on. And the impetus for that is, for many years, hunting and fishing has basically paid for conservation in this state, as it has through most states. And state wildlife areas in particular, state trust lands in particular, were that money for us to acquire those, be it whether it's through fee title or through an easement or something of that nature. That money has come from, excuse me, hunting and fishing licenses, and the money to maintain those properties is exclusively coming from hunting and fishing licenses. So as this population in the state has been growing, and we see these effects, especially along the Front Range, our properties, our state wildlife areas, and our state trust lands are just being used for those recreational activities that were not in the spirit of the property. So essentially, to put it in as simple terms as we can, we're getting overrun. So a lot of our properties are just getting overrun with uses that the properties were never intended for. And what that has happened is that's caused negative impacts on the wildlife and the habitat within those properties. So we've been, for a number of years, we've been discussing exactly how to deal with this. And the decision was made that let's just have everybody pay to play, if you will. So if you want to access one of these properties, then you need to buy a hunting or fishing license, and that money will go directly into that property that you're using. Just like if you purchase a parks pass for any national park or a county open space, the principle is the same. It's just that it's being done through a hunting and fishing license. And what I tell everybody when you talk about bang for your buck, buying a $30 annual fishing license, if you will, which is the simplest, gives you access to over 250 state wildlife areas and well over 300 state trust lands for an entire year. So compare that to Rocky Mountain National Park, and we're a pretty good bargain. So that's sort of the impetus behind that, why we've done that. And of course, it's caused a lot of upheaval throughout the public, but again, we're essentially just trying to regain control of these properties. So. I don't know if there's any questions, I'm sure.
Thanks, Jason. So Stuart Leach has his hand up. Stuart, I'm gonna click and allow you to talk. Did you have a question you wanted to ask? And you'll have to unmute yourself, I believe.
I'll change my question here after hearing Jason speak. I'm wondering what the reaction may be from the state legislature to this change, which I personally think is long overdue. And now my wife, for the first time in her life, has a fishing license.
I can't speak for the legislature. I'm not sure what the reaction is. Mark may have a better idea of what the legislature's reaction was to this.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think obviously there's a lot of interest in this particular situation, and we need to be cognizant of the non-hunting and non-fishing publics out there that still want to have the opportunity to be able to use these properties. So between the commission and the division and outside interest groups, we're developing an outside stakeholder process, an internal stakeholder process, and then an external stakeholder process that would look at ways that we could possibly allow some access to these state wildlife areas by people that do not want to buy a hunting or fishing license. And so we had to work through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Our director, Dan Prenslow, worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure that they were okay with that approach, because a lot of these properties, I don't want to get too far down the road here with the question, it's a good question, but they were bought with federal dollars. Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson dollars that are federal aid actually to the division. And so if those properties are not being used for the purposes by which they were purchased, then the division itself could be in federal aid diversion. So there was a real risk that we might lose our federal aid if we weren't in compliance with it. So we're working through that process right now. I think, obviously the regulation was passed by the commission and went into effect July 1. And if any of you have listened to the commission meeting since then, Director Prenslow is very supportive of our field officers taking a low-key approach to enforcement on this situation. We're really in an education mode right now and not trying to write tickets or actually even, wanting to write any tickets at all on it. If we can educate people, if there's an egregious situation, we'll deal with it. But we're working through this slowly and carefully, and I think we'll come out with a good outcome for everybody.
Great. So Ian Fisher, did you have a question? I did, and I think Mark, if you can hear me, I think Mark pretty much answered it, but the fact that the state money goes directly to SWA, but we cannot allocate it from anything other than hunting and fishing, because there are plenty of folks who habitat these areas who are not hunters and fishermen, and that's where the contention comes in this to play. If you had something like a habitat stamp, which obviously goes to designated grasslands and things within the state, that would be delineated from Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson Act, it would, I think, be advantageous to these folks, because, as a non-consumptive user that they are, they don't have someone speaking for them at this point, and they've been kind of truncated from these lands that they may have been using for years. And I think that's something that the CPW could probably come upon, because not everybody's looking to, unfortunately buy a hunting and fishing license, even though that's what pays for these lands.
And, Ian, and that's been brought up, and I think we anticipated that conversation would come up. And, you might remember we did have the habitat stamp years ago, and well, we still have it, but the purpose of it years ago when it first came out was to give those quote unquote, if you will, non-consumptive users the ability to a way to access the property and pay for it. The problem is that part of that Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson money is that federal match program for every habitat stamp or access permit, if you will, or something that isn't a hunting and fishing license that we sell. That money actually gets deducted from the match that they normally give us for hunting and fishing licenses. So in the end, when we have the habitat stamp, or if we have an access permit, we actually end up losing money because of it. So, and we're not the only state facing this. A lot of we're having conversations, just like many of the other states are having conversations with the Fish and Wildlife Service about this, and maybe down the road there might be, as Mark mentioned, there might be some sort of a permit or a pass, if you will, for lack of a better term, that will be recognized by the Dingle Johnson and Pittman Robertson. But we're talking about federal government, and they move a little slow, so it's probably just going to take a little time. It's not something we'll have solved, within the next year or two. But yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue, and you're right. I mean, this regulation could impact those folks that just, if it's a moral reason or something like that, don't want to purchase a hunting or fishing license, and we're definitely sensitive to that. And as Mark said, as a supervisor, I've told all my guys that this is not about booting people off of land. This is an opportunity to educate folks on our agency, on the history of conservation in the state, and on state wildlife areas and how they differ from state parks and national parks and open spaces and things like that. So you view this as an opportunity to educate the public and do some public outreach for the relevancy of this agency. So that's the approach that I've told my guys to take. And I think that's the approach that we're taking statewide. And you know, I tell folks, if you want to have a direct impact on wildlife conservation, the best way to do it is to purchase one of those hunting or fishing licenses. Right? We realize that not everybody wants to do that. So we're working through it.
I also want to reiterate that the groups that are being put together, this working group, there's representation from folks that do not want to be purchasing the hunting and fishing license too. So they are definitely at the table, and we are cooperating with them. Area Wildlife Manager Mark Lamb up there shaking his head. He's our internal representative from the Northeast region that is actually on the working group, and he's been heavily invested and involved in this as well. So
thanks, guys. So we are coming up on the end of our meeting, but we have some folks who've been hanging in there this whole time, and I think they've got some interesting things to add too. So I'll just get to them, and then we can stay a little longer to answer questions, or people can, you know, go about their evening as they need to. So next up we have Mandy Brandt, who can introduce herself and give us just a little update on some state wildlife area fishing out east and what's been going on with that.
Thank you, Kristen. My name is Mandy Brandt, and I am the area aquatic biologist for Area 3, which includes the upper 6 northeast counties in Colorado. And I just wanted to touch on a little bit of information from some fisheries in the region, and then some stuff specific to Area 3. As Jeff Spohn mentioned earlier, our crews are currently up spawning brown trout in North Park at North Delaney Lake. And we just got word this evening that they actually broke a spawn record. They had 376 spawns today, so they'll have pulled about 900,000 eggs in a day. We were looking to get about 600,000 eggs this year, so we accomplished the task in one day. They did already set nets, so they'll spawn some more fish tomorrow. So it looks like the take will be really good this year, and we'll be able to meet all the requests for the state, which is really good news. As far as fisheries in Area 3, just wanted to touch on a couple things. As Todd Schmidt mentioned, we're in a pretty severe drought this year, and managing the 4 large irrigation reservoirs out here, those reservoirs are first intended to store irrigation water for farmers. So when there's a severe drought, those reservoirs tend to go down very quickly. And this year, the Julesburg Irrigation District let us know that there was a potential they might drain Jumbo Reservoir. And with that information, we went ahead and created a public fish salvage so that folks could go out and make the most use out of the fish while they could. And we also went out and used some electrofishing equipment and salvaged some fish and moved those to North Sterling as well. The very good news is, as Todd Schmidt mentioned, you know, that snowstorm brought a lot of water. The irrigation company was able to bring some water into Jumbo, and the reservoir came up quite a bit. And the last word is that it probably will not be drained. The fishery is doing well. We have not seen any sort of fish kill at all. And so we're looking at the potential of taking that public fish salvage off, because those fish are probably going to make it, which should mean good fishing next spring, which is great news. So just want to mention, you know, those reservoirs are meant for irrigation water. That's our primary purpose. Thankfully, we get to use them for recreation as a secondary purpose. So in years like this, you know, sometimes we need to enact a public salvage. But in other years when water levels are great, fishing is great. The other thing I wanted to touch on from Area 3 is about Stalker Lake, which is out near the Ray Hatchery in the town of Ray. And there was some much needed repairs that needed to be done to the dam and the outlet pipe. And to do those, it was necessary to drain the lake. So we went ahead and did a fish salvage at Stalker Lake as well, and it was very, very successful. We ended up salvaging over 9,000 pounds of fish, which is approximately 36,000 fish that we saved from the lake. We brought those fish to some other waters where they are safe. And while the reservoir is down, we'll be doing some habitat projects and some access improvements and making the most of our time while that lake water is down. And then once all that is done, we will refill the lake, and those fish that we salvaged will go directly back into Stalker Lake. So almost nearly all the fish we salvage will go right back into the lake, which means that fishing should be good there as well next year. So that's about all I had for Area 3 in the Northeast region aquatics wise. If you have any questions.
Thanks, Mandy.
I would just, oh, go ahead.
Nope.
Nope, go ahead, Kristen.
Nope, I was just going to change the subject. So if you want to add something, now's the time.
Oh, I would just like to give kudos to Mandy, the Area 3 staff. You know, when droughts hit like this, it's kind of a team effort and, you know, all hands on deck. So, you know, just appreciate everybody's willingness, working long days, working long nights. The hatchery section for being able to take fish on the hatchery from Stalker so we can quickly move those fish back in. You know, just wanted to give kudos all around. So thank you guys. It's such a team effort.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I concur. So we have one more speaker for the agenda, and then we can stick around for some questions. If we don't get to your questions tonight, we'll certainly follow up with you. It's an email or two to follow up on, and so we'll get back with you in the next few days and make sure you get your questions answered. But now I'd like Justin, if we still, yeah, there you are, Justin.
Yeah.
So Justin is a wildlife officer, and I'll let him introduce himself and give you kind of a hunting update for the Northern Front Range.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody this evening. Yeah, real quick, I'm Justin Foster with the District Wildlife Officer for the Boulder South District, and was asked to give a few updates on the hunting seasons. Unfortunately, this year up in the Area 4, kind of the north west part of Area 4, we've been having, you know, our big fires going on and a lot of issues there with Forest Service closures and road closures and stuff like that. So it's been a fairly slow hunting season up in our area. I'm sure it's busy in other parts of the Northeast region as well. But just to kind of give you an update, early on with archery season, you know, we had some opened areas, Forest Service areas open for folks to hunt, kind of in the northern portions of Unit 8 and Unit 7. Folks did fairly well up there, harvest with deer and elk. They had an opportunity to get into some elk and deer up there, but there were quite a few hunters in those areas just because of the closures. Our muzzleloader season was the same thing. They were able to get into those areas and hunt some, and they did harvest some in that season as well. They, again, with the closures, it was tough for them to get to some of the areas they normally hunt. And then kind of same with our bear seasons this year. A lot of the closures, we did get some harvest on our bears this year, kind of on the lower Poudre Canyon area, and some of the private property in west of Fort Collins and those areas there. So we did get some harvest there. Not a lot, not as much as probably what we would have liked in some areas. And then we're just coming off of a big weekend with the opener of pronghorn season out on the Pawnee grasslands. That was a busy season for all of us here out of Area 4, out in Troy Florian's district. And it was pretty successful. The weather was great. The wind wasn't blowing. It was nice temperatures Saturday and Sunday both. And so folks had a you know, pretty enjoyable hunt. And then, you know, come yesterday, the winds picked up a little bit and the smoke blew in. So visibility was a little tough out there, but folks are out there enjoying themselves there as well. Nothing major this year with violations really in our area. We've had a few bait cases that we're working on and trying to wrap up, deer and elk baiting cases, a few cases out in the Pawnee National Grassland during pronghorn season. Educated, as Jason can say, we educated a lot of folks out on the Pawnee National Grassland this year during the pronghorn season. They implemented a new travel management plan out there, so a lot of the 2-track roads that were normally opened are now closed, and there's only certain roads open. So a lot of education done out there. And other than that, that's so far so good. We're starting to field a lot of calls with first rifle season coming up this weekend. Hunters are trying to decide if they need to turn their tags in or not due to the fire closures. And so we're getting quite a few calls out in the field along with the office. The ladies there at the front desk are fielding those calls. Just guys holding on to their tags as long as they can to see and hope that maybe this Forest Service closure with the fire shrinks a little bit and they'll have some access to get in there. But as Jason said, I don't see that anytime soon with that closure shrinking here in the next, first and second rifle season. So that's kind of the updates I've got here out of Area 4. Any other questions? Feel free to answer them for sure.
Thanks, Justin. I just appreciate having some field staff here to kind of answer how it is. If we can ask Justin or anybody else questions. I know we had a pretty packed agenda tonight, and so I appreciate everybody staying on, and I know it was a lot of us just telling you things. So, we're going to try to build some email lists and some groups and reach out, and hopefully we can structure some of these in the future to be a little more conversational and get some more questions from you and what you guys would like to hear about. So, stay tuned for some of that, and we'll try to make this more interactive in the future. And, God willing, in person again one day. We had, before COVID hit, we were going to have this at a brewery. I kid you not. Try to do something different. So someday again. But with that, I will leave it open to any questions that you have. If folks want to drop off, they can. I will email that stuff out on the delegate election just as soon as we're done here. And voting, again, I'll stay open until 10. And we do have one question. And it's going back to the CWD conversation. So it's pretty easy to imagine how reducing the number of mature bucks will play out in units that aren't trophy or high preference point units. However, will we manage this in those high demand units where a higher percentage of bucks, and especially mature bucks, is more of an expectation? Shannon, do you want to take this?
Sure, I can take that. It actually goes back to what Mark said earlier. I mean, a lot of our management is a balance of all of our considerations. Obviously CWD is a management issue, and we take the best available science to look at what our options are and use our CWD plan. But we do have to balance that with what, the public expects for either a hunt or the quality of deer on the landscape. So, it's probably not an easy A to plus B equals C on every DAU, but it's really a combination of balancing all the biological and social considerations with license allocation.
Great, thanks, Shannon. This next question, I'm gonna just hand straight over to Mark Leslie. With the statewide ballot to bring back wolves, if it passes, will CPW be managing that?
That's a good question. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has the authority over wolves at this present time because they're an endangered species. So my take on it, and it's just my take on it, and from discussions with the agency and trying to figure out how this all looks, if the ballot initiative passes that mandates that commission and the division put together a plan to reintroduce wolves by the end of 2023, if we do not have management authority over those animals, then that's going to be really interesting about how that works. Now, the Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed a delisting on the gray wolf, and if that population is delisted, then management authority would then come over to Colorado Parks and Wildlife at that point. Now, I don't know, there's likely, I would say, to be lawsuits to stop the delisting at that point. And so this could be in limbo for a while, even though the ballot initiative might mandate us to develop a plan, we really wouldn't be the management agency unless the animals were delisted. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Mark. Got one more on wolves. Ken wants to know how the mating pair is doing in the north area.
The last update we had was probably, I would say, around June, I think, and we put a press release out. Jason Clay can probably give me the exact time frame because I think he was involved in it. But we really haven't. We don't really have any updates from that group since then, from my understanding. So.
Okay, we've got one. Is the zebra mussel and other invasive species spreading or still isolated to a handful of waters? Jeff, do you want to take this or?
Yeah, so it's zebra and what else? Zebra and quaggas?
Other invasive species, so zebra and quagga.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on what specific species we're talking about. I mean, Eurasian water milfoil, the plant, is moving around quite a bit because it breaks off and it just gets on a piece of equipment. New Zealand mud snails, we've seen more population of those pop up here and there. Zebra and quagga mussels, we have yet to this date found an adult. We found DNA from juveniles, but also all of that, my statement is probably a factor too of us looking more in depth for those species as well than we ever have before. So to say, the populations of invasives are increasing, I would say with New Zealand mud snails and Eurasian water milfoil, probably. But at the same point, it's just a factor of how many places you're looking and things like that. So it's hard to say, but populations are popping up. It's just whether or not those populations have been there long before we started looking.
Great. With that, so Jason just shared a link to the press release, but you have it to the panelists. Jason, can you change that to panelists and attendees?
Yes.
Seems simpler just to ask than to type that.
Thanks, Jason.
Are there any other questions from anybody at the meeting tonight?
Well, Kristen, I'd like to thank you for putting this together. I appreciate that. I want to thank all the CPW staff that are on this call that did a great job, the presenters and all of our other staff that are on this call. Thanks for all the work you guys do. And I want to thank the public, members of the public, our sportsmen and women that are on this call. As I mentioned before, extremely important for us to interface with you. This is just a small window of what CPW does for all of the resources for Colorado, that wildlife and parks resources. And so we really are excited about the level of participation tonight. And, you know, hearing you guys' backgrounds and your bio was really fascinating to me. And we look forward to working with you in the future. So please help us where you can, and look forward to seeing how the ballot comes out too. So thank you very much.
Okay, everybody have a great evening, and we will do this again soon. Thanks.